But just as a way of direct answer to Honorable Bowen, the Senate has a role on BPS, but their role is restricted to just one ministry, the Ministry of Finance and National Planning, because they have a role on consideration of the debt management, since debt also touches on counties, and they also have a role on BPS on the matter of division of revenue, because the division of revenue bill is a bill that you all know comes to this house and also goes to the other house. So they have a role. The question, Honorable Speaker, is, and I know, Honorable Speaker, you're a former senator, so I'll be very cautious with my words. But I was just wondering, has it taken the Senate too long to acclimatize themselves with the new constitution and know where their roles are and where their mandate goes up to? Because we have absolutely no problem with the Senate calling or summoning the Minister for Finance to deal with the debt management strategy paper, or even to deal on BPS on matters to do with the division of revenue bill. However, looking at, I just got a copy from the Honorable Kangogo Bowen, signed by the clerk of the Senate, inviting the Minister, the Cabinet Secretary for Water, Engineer Eric Muga, to appear before the committee on Tuesday 25th, on Tuesday 4th March at 11:30 a.m. The agenda of the meeting is to deliberate on the proposed policies, programs, and expenditure ceilings of the state departments under the ministry's purview. The ministries, not the county governments. 2, the implementation status of the financial year 24-25 budget as at 31st December 2024. And Honorable Speaker, just looking at the entire agenda, it is actually misplaced, because this is work that should be done by the Departmental Committee for Water and Irrigation of the National Assembly. And I want to agree with the Honorable Kerema, it is not just a waste of public resources, but a waste of valuable time of honorable senators and more valuable time of the Cabinet Secretary. But I want to speak to the Cabinet Secretaries, Honorable Speaker. If you are a Cabinet Secretary and you have 2 invitations, one by the Departmental Committee that oversights you and your ministry, and one from another house that oversights governors and county governments, you have a choice to decide where to appear and to know which side of your bread is buttered. You must know which house can impeach and which house cannot impeach you. And that should make it very easy for any Cabinet Secretary who has an invitation from Senate and from the National Assembly on matters BPS, or indeed any other matter. The people who oversight you, the people's representatives, leave alone the those who represent counties, those who represent the people, when they summon you, have your priorities right. So I would advise this particular Cabinet Secretary, if he has an invitation from the Committee of the National Assembly on Water and Irrigation, and he has another one from the Senate, I am being told to repeat, Honorable Speaker, with your indulgence, if a Cabinet Secretary, particularly this one who has a letter dated 25th February, if you have an invitation from the Departmental Committee oversighting you as a Cabinet Secretary of the national government, not a CEC of a county government somewhere, of the national government, the National Assembly, and the Senate, please just know which side of your bread is buttered and appear before the house that oversights you. Give it priority over any other house. They can spend their time as they wish. We cannot dictate how they spend their time, Honorable Speaker. But I think to close it, Honorable Speaker, we must tell the executive, especially on matters touching on budget processing, priority must be in the National Assembly. And it's not because we want to fight other colleagues. You know, Honorable Speaker, we have the intention, because you are a former senator and you have led us well, yourself and the Speaker of the Senate, in having a consultative process so that we do not have squabbles between us and the other house. Honorable Speaker, I've had even the issues you had members raise here yesterday on RMLF. Honorable Speaker, it is not that these members control any funds and members of parliament do not want to control even a single shilling or even a cent of the roads maintenance funds, but we are just protecting our constitutional mandate to oversight national government institutions like KERA, KURA, KENHA, because that is our mandate. And we have not asked for money to go to members of parliament. And I have never had any member of parliament asking for money to go to them, because they don't manage CRC money. It is managed independently by the regional managers in charge of KURA, KERA, KENHA, and they have their procurement teams that procure. Members of parliament have nothing to do with the roads funds. And therefore, Honorable Speaker, it's not that we want to pick quarrels with anyone. We do not want to pick quarrels, but we must remain truthful to our constitution. And I want to believe senior counsel, Tienda Omolo, will agree with me, because he was among the drafters of this constitution, Honorable Speaker. And I can see him raising up his hand, so I rest my case to be held by the senior counsel.
Tienda Omolo.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, the leader of majority, who almost became the leader of minority, has reminded us that you are a former senator, which is true. But I am sure, for now, your allegiance to the Senate is historical, but your allegiance to this House is present, and it carries the day. Mr. Speaker.
And my allegiance to the law and the Constitution is permanent.
Yes, Mr. Speaker, but on that must be tried on an hourly basis. Mr. Speaker, the issue raised by the Honorable Kagogo Bowen goes beyond what he has raised, the budget policy statement. Mr. Speaker, it goes to the jurisdiction of the Houses of Parliament. And I think, and I want to urge you, Mr. Speaker, that you issue an authoritative communication, at least from this House, founded on Article 94, Article 95, because what I have noticed is a situation of overreaching. It is not just that committee. There are many times, there are many committees in which we serve where a particular government department is supposed to attend, and then we are told there is a simultaneous invitation by another committee of the Senate. And if you examine keenly, you cannot see the nexus between that committee and the work of the counties and the jurisdiction of the Senate. For this House, I believe we have endeavored to confine ourselves to our jurisdiction. When the Constitution says we have no role in the impeachment of governors, this House has never tried to play a role. We watch from afar like the rest of Kenyans. When the Constitution says that in the impeachment of the president or the deputy president, our role is limited to initiation, and we are not the trial chamber, we have restricted ourselves to that initiation. Something that many Kenyans do not understand. When I was out there, many Kenyans were telling me, but how come in the National Assembly you did not give the erstwhile deputy president the opportunity to defend himself? You did not allow lawyers to come, because they do not understand that ours is restricted to initiation. The Senate is the trial chamber, and we respect that. Reciprocally, the Senate must respect where the jurisdiction lies in the National Assembly. Failure to do so results first in creating difficulties for government to work, because government ministers and PSS and other officials are permanently being invited to the two houses of parliament so that they cannot even do their work. Secondly, it results in a very dangerous situation where you could have one house of parliament making a recommendation A and the other house making the opposite recommendation. And the ultimate effect is to reduce the final effect of parliament as parliament. And that should not be allowed to happen, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, it must be remembered that when a committee of this House, just like the Senate, summons an officer of government, they have the powers of the court. But that committee must address itself to why it is given the powers of the court. You cannot have a criminal court summoning someone on an environmental matter, and vice versa. So even the committees of the Senate and the Senate as Senate must first address and ask itself, is this within our power, before we assume the powers of the court? Mr. Speaker, I do wonder that, we have many litigants. Some people call them busybodies, but I do not call them that. We encourage people to go to court. But these free court-going persons, I have never known why they've never challenged the assumption of jurisdiction by the Senate on matters that do not belong to them. But until they do so, Mr. Speaker, I think the commencement point
Many
is
of them are either vexatious or surrogates.
Yes, indeed, many are surrogates. And many are inspired by things other than respect for the Constitution. Mr. Speaker, I want to suggest that the starting point to bring sanity is an authoritative communication from you. And that will even help some of these government ministers and PSS because they do not know where to go for refuge. If they get something like that, they might rely on it and say, we had this communication from the National Assembly, and then it is up to the Senate or anybody else to challenge it in court. I so submit, Mr. Speaker.
Kenan.
Mr. Speaker, I'm glad that Honorable Otieno Amolo, who was part of the drafters of the current constitution, I believe still has some of the notes that led to the inclusion of the Senate in the current constitution, Mr. Speaker. The Senate that I had in mind, the Senate that came later on towards the tail end of the sitting we have had in Naivasha, and the Senate that I see right now are completely different. And luckily, I'm speaking from experience, because the Senate that we have had in the first Bombers draft, the Senate that ultimately will help in including the current constitution, and the Senate that I see are completely different. The only thing that brings this to the fore, Mr. Speaker, is an attempt to illegally create a constitutional niche that doesn't exist for the Senate. The Senate is our house. It's one of the houses of Parliament. You can be here today as a member of the National Assembly. Tomorrow you'll be a senator. We do not want to badmouth them. It's our house. You have been there. It's a respectable house. But I think one thing that we will not accept is to create an avenue for chaos. The technical people at the ministries, whether they are PSCs, CSCs, and COs, Mr. Speaker, are operating on a very difficult